Go ahead.
No, mine's as dumb as that. I bought a T-shirt that is the name of it's a tank top. That's the store description was Budborn, and it is Bloodborne in the Budweiser logo font.
Oh my God!
It is a black tank top. I'm just like, this is a John shirt if I've ever seen.
If that's not a John while playing bass at a boss fight show attire, that if I've ever seen it,
just like the most shit posty like thing I could possibly wear. Oh,
I like that shirt, John. That's a good shirt.
It's a good shirt.
Yeah, well, not the shirt you bought, but that shirt's cool.
The one you have,
the shirt
the
you're
one
wearing
you currently are wearing.
Right now.
Yeah, I agree.
It's
a little almost like a little sailor vibe going on.
It's B-Ness, the alternate outfit that he has in
Smash. Yeah.
B-Ness? I don't know if
one of it's like a black and yellow stripe that Ness wears, and
B-Ness. I got you.
Yes, I'm trying to. We have our own. What are the? Oh yeah,
I was thinking like Venus and Venus is almost like what I was picturing that.
No, the pink and white Captain Falcon is Captain Ntsats in my group of friends. Ntsats.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with John Hines.
Hey there.
And Randall Nolery.
Hey folks.
And we are back as always to talk about some video games, and it feels like it's been a while since we've sat down to record one of these guys. I think it's been I just got back home to Chicago from a trip back home to Michigan for my brother is having like a baby shower. They were having a baby shower, and he's just had a surgery today as of the day of recording this. So it's been a hectic few days. So I was back home and brought my Nintendo Switch with me.
Heck yeah.
So I had to get some gaming into when you're around the family, you gotta get a little time in a way to decompress and whatever. So Randall, you've been, have we ever talked about the Hori Split Pad Pros on the podcast before?
We have not. No,
I'm sure you've at least given them like a shout out. I think I might have given them.
I said that too fast. I think I might have given them a shout out at some point at least because I was so over the moon about them. But continue.
Yeah, you've been hyping these up for a while, and I was like, I feel like they've come up at some point in passing. But yeah, basically, I'm sure I've mentioned on the podcast before how like my hands will cramp up a little bit when I'm playing on Nintendo Switch. And just before I hit the road, my Hori Split Pad Pro arrived. I ordered it off Amazon, sadly. But yeah, I just got those in the mail, and it's almost like a Pro controller split in two, for lack of a better description or whatever, and I got the blue version or whatever, and it snaps on the side of the Switch, and it actually almost like frames the Switch in a way. Like I wasn't expecting the controller to kind of like pop out like forward a little. I don't know how to describe it, but there's like a little bit of like a bezel almost that it adds to like the Switch.
It's more chunky than the Switches itself. Yeah.
Right, and because of that, and there's even like a little. It's really nicely designed. It's like it got this little extra like. It's not a clip, but it's like the part of like the clip that snaps onto the side of the Switch. It has like a little like extra like I don't know, a little extra like lip ridge. That kind of like exactly that kind of like braces the Switch, so it just feels like a little sturdier while you're playing. And I didn't play a ton of games while I was home, but pretty much every night before I went to bed I'd play like a little Lonely Mountains Downhill, or I was trying to like get a better high score on Ghost Grab 3000. I did up my score a little bit. I'm still chasing Arpy in the Discord. Arpy's in the top 10, I think, on that like third hard stage on the Nintendo Switch leaderboards. Anyways, I think I'm at like number 12, so I'm getting there. It's like a bullet hell, like a pretty cool take on a bullet hell. I think I've talked about Ghost Grab 3000 on the podcast, but it's like a really cool game from our pal Crowbar Scott, Matt Glanville, who's been on the podcast before. But yeah, I just kind of was bouncing between that, and I specifically was playing Lonely Mountains Downhill, and I had played that handheld a little bit before I just picked it up on my Switch and had played it with the Joy-Cons, and it was a little bit frustrating. So it was like really nice to play this now with the Hori Split Pad Pros with like a solid joystick, full-size buttons. I just basically wanted to give a shout out to those as well. I know they're actually coming out with like a new version of this Switch Pad Pro Plus that like also allows it to be like a wired controller for the Switch.
Nice.
And I was thinking about waiting for that, but I was like, in reality, like my Switch is halfway across the room. I'd have to get like USB extension cords. I was like, I'm probably not going to use it for that feature. It does bum me out that you can't like clip it onto the little dog bone controllers and use it as a wireless controller. But for the sake of like actually being able to play my Nintendo Switch handheld and not cramp up instantly, pretty much, I'd say it's worth it. I think they set me back like $40, $50.
Can you put the Switch in the dock with the Hori controller plugged in, or do you have to take those off?
It fits perfect, and it actually almost feels a little bit more secure because like of how those controllers like stick out forward.
I would agree.
So it's like, in my mind, I'm pretty much just going to leave those on the Switch at all times and just keep it docked like that. It is bulky. I mean, it really adds like a lot of size to the Switch. Like I have like one of those travel cases that's like very specifically just made to like fit the Switch in and of itself. And like I had to like pack the controllers separately in a different bag. But that's no big deal. And I do have a bigger case, but case or otherwise, it definitely just makes playing the game so much more comfortable.
It does.
I know everybody doesn't have like huge hands, but I wouldn't say I have like massive hands, but it's enough to where like, you know, any game that has like dual stick controls or where you're really like using the camera relatively actively on the right stick, like with the Joy-Cons, there's pretty much no chance I can play like Breath of the Wild for any extended time handheld. But like now I feel like, yeah, I totally can.
I'd agree with all that. I'd say it does fit like maybe a little bit like you kind of have to be more purposeful when you're putting the Switch with those grips in the dock. You kind of have to make sure it's lined up more than you would have with the Joy-Cons on it.
Yeah, you have to have it like perfectly parallel or perpendicular, whatever, as you like set it down.
Yeah, but you're right that it's more secure once it's in there too. Like it doesn't flop around or anything. And I would say I'm the same way. Once I got the Switch Pad Pro, Hori Switch Pad Pro, I left those things on my my OLED Switch permanently, and that's how I have 90 hours in Retro Bowl, is because I've been playing it that way.
Oh, 90 hours. 90 nice.
Yeah. But
heck yeah.
I will also add that I think the D-pad on there is quite great.
Oh, that's a huge upgrade, instead of having the split,
Exactly, which, you know, I understand the design conceit for having the split buttons when they released it for the sake of the individual Joy-Cons as controllers, but if that's not an often scenario for you, it's nice to have a real D-pad, and that's a good D-pad on there.
It's a really good D-pad. You almost like default to it when you're playing 2D games, which I know I've mentioned on the podcast, or at least during our videos and stuff. I'll say like, you know what, I'm actually like tending to play like even like Super Mario World. If I'm emulating it, I'll play it with a joystick, or even on the Switch, I'll play it with a joystick with the Pro controller.
Right.
But like with this, when I did actually fire up the Super Nintendo, I didn't play Super Mario World, but I was like playing the online games for a minute or two.
Yeah.
And I was using the D-pad like instantly. And as much as like there are very few, I'm such a weird, like when it comes to the Switch, like I will pull out like the dog bone and like the Joy-Cons for like certain puzzle games. Cause like I do like that split D-pad, like having like the very distinct buttons for
like Puyo
up, down, left, and right. Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
like,
moving on a grid.
I want that. And they're closer together. Like it's just like I can like really, I don't know. It just feels a little.
It's an explicit button press at that point. You know that it is nicer for that.
Yeah, and it took me a lot to get over the hump, because really, like my main like hesitancy of picking these up was like, I can't. It's only for playing in handheld mode, so you do have to know that going in. Like there's no battery operation whatsoever, and it does seem to drain the battery a little bit quicker. I noticed like the Switch was like, you know, dying a little bit quicker than it would otherwise, but still, it's like I charged it every night and had plenty of juice to play some games. But yeah, I didn't expect to really talk about those for as long as I did. I actually intended to talk more about the games, because I'm still just loving the shit out of Lonely Mountains Downhill. But I talked about that on Save It for the Cast recently. So
nice.
Why don't we just move on to the kind of meat of the conversation here? We've all been playing some kind of, I guess all of these games are inspired by the Soul. Well, one of them is kind of part of the Souls series in a way, I guess. And definitely a lot of Souls DNA and a lot of Zelda DNA in these games. I've been playing Tunic, which is I've been playing on Xbox Game Pass. I was super pumped that they announced that day one, because I know I've mentioned on the podcast a few times I've been unemployed for a little bit, so a $30 game on day one is probably not something I'm going to dive into right off the bat. So once again, Game Pass came through, and it also came through because I've been played a little bit of Death's Door, which John's been playing. And the reason I kind of like tied these together in my mind, other than the fact that they are relatively similar games, somebody like tweeted like a fan art, like pixel art of the crow from Death's Door. Mm-hmm. And they were like, I've been playing some Crow Zelda, and I've been thinking about playing some Fox Zelda. And I was like, oh yeah, that's totally what they are. And then, back to the Souls stuff. Randall's been digging into Elden Ring, so we'll probably get into that on the later half of the episode. Although I will say up front that Randall's going to keep it pretty spoiler free. If you've listened to any of our previous episodes of the podcast, Randall pretty much does not get into any spoiler territory. He's probably the most sensitive of us when it comes to spoilers. So like you can pretty much go ahead and listen. I mean, we'll definitely like tag anything for any of these three games as far as like if we're going to say anything spoilery, but I think we'll probably end up bouncing between the three a little bit, but I guess I'll kind of take the lead, even though I've already been talking enough already. But yeah, Tunic is such a cool game. It's a game that I've been waiting for a while. And honestly, I think it was initially, at least when I first saw it, it was like announced during some kind of Xbox event. So I kind of always in the back of my mind assumed it was going to come to Game Pass just because I actually thought like Microsoft was somehow behind publishing it, but it's actually from Finji, who's done some pretty big indie games over the recent years. And yeah, this game just kind of, it really is almost, I shouldn't say this, I can't say this with any frame of reference because I haven't really played any of the Souls games, but it feels like equal parts Link to the Past meets like Souls style combat where it is like really intense. But one of the things that I've been really surprised by is how open world this game is. Like for me, it's felt pretty much like I've sort of been on a path. It's really kind of cryptic as things open up. You kind of wake up like just like you do in like Link's Awakening or something where you're like on the beach shore and you just kind of wake up and you have a pretty straightforward path. But there's like all sorts of stuff that you see right off the bat. They're like, oh, here's this like pedestal. And when you walk over it, you're like, it feels like I'm definitely going to be able to interact with that. And then later on, you're like, oh, you find out that's how you fast travel. So that's like one of the fast travel pedestals, but you really don't know how to interact with it. And you really don't know how to interact with anything because they keep everything really cryptic. There's almost like, there is some English like in some of the menus and whatever, but the menus or like a lot of the language is in this like runic, like made up language.
There are going to be a lot of through lines between these games, huh?
Yeah. Oh, there's tons. There's tons. And so I had posted a clip on like Twitter just after I did a stream. So I think I streamed everything that I've played of Tunic so far, other than a little bit of like I had some technical internet issues, but I've played like probably about 5 hours of the game so far. And I've really been, and I actually streamed the first like 2.5 hours of Death's Door as well. And I've really been enjoying both games, but I just, for whatever reason, was a little more sucked into the world of Tunic. But I had posted a clip of like the first boss and somebody was like, oh, congrats on beating, I think it was called like the Guardian or something like that. And I was like, oh, cool, thanks. And then somebody else was like, oh, the Guardian. I was like, actually, the first boss I faced was the Librarian. And I was like, wait, what? Because up to that point, like to me, it felt like I was like there was a ton of like exploration. There's a ton of little nooks and crannies with secrets and stuff, but I felt like I was kind of being guided along a path. Like for example, the boss that I fought, you pick up these little like manuals along the way. Like they're actually like, they feel very much like an old like NES manual. They have like hand painted like concept art drawn on them. And they're actually like show you like, this is how you dodge roll and this is where your invisibility frames are. But sometimes some of that's in English, but some of it's in that like runic language. So you'll see like, okay, there's like, you pick up certain items along the way. And actually somebody during the stream was like, hey, are you cool with spoilers, Kev? And I was like, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt as long as you're not going to spoil like story or anything crazy. And then I found out, so like, again, by reading the manuals, because I was streaming, I wasn't paying enough attention to this, but like in the manual, it tells you that these certain items you pick up at the save points, which are like these altars, you can actually like offer up these items to upgrade either your strength or your HP or your stamina or your magic or whatever, but it doesn't really tell you that explicitly in the game. You have to kind of like read and intuit like the different pages of the manual, and you keep picking up like, I think when you pick up a page, it's like a front and back of a page of the manual, which includes like even like a map, like a hand-drawn map that even though it is a page of the manual, it even has a little like Fox logo that shows where you are in the world. But like, I don't know. Again, it's like, just like Death's Door, it's got that isometric perspective, like a low poly environment, and
Yeah,
it
I like
has
the look of that of Tunic. It's got a cool look.
It's a beautiful game, and as is Death's Door. I was playing both of these games, and I just, for whatever reason, because I started them both at the same time, I was a little more drawn into the world of Tunic. I almost said Death's Door, and then I almost said Finji. But yeah, somebody had said in a tweet as well. I can't remember who it was, but they were like, Tunic is like takes everything from Link to the Past and everything from the Dark Souls series, but also realizes that Donkey Kong Country has the best music. And I was like, oh
wow,
man!
And I've been playing this game with headphones on, and that is such a great comparison. And it's very much like reminiscent of like the water levels in Donkey Kong Country. So it's got that like mysterious kind of like,
synth, heavy texture.
It is so good. And when I mentioned nooks and crannies before, I'm talking every fucking nook and every cranny. Like, even when you feel like you can't see something, and like you had mentioned in Death's Door, and I'm sure we'll get into this, like how it kind of like felt similar to like the first Dark Souls game, where you kind of like you complete like the first little roundabout path, and then all of a sudden you like knock down a ladder and like, oh, here's a new shortcut that like opens up your path. And Tunic is very similar, where like stuff that you wouldn't even see otherwise, like you'll like right before the first boss, that guardian that I made it to, you find this like rope up at the top and you throw the rope down. But like then I climb down the rope, and from where you actually can get on the rope later, you can't even see it. So you like have to literally know that you threw it down before to be able to climb on it again. Like, it's kind of like hidden by the isometric angle of the camera.
Oh, nice.
So like you really have to like sort of memorize certain aspects of the map. Like I've been absolutely loving the game. The combat is really intense. There's just really cool enemy designs. I haven't been able to dive back in. Like I mentioned at the top, I was just out of town, so I didn't have my Xbox with me.
Right.
And I was thinking about trying to play some today, and I was like, you know what? I want to kind of just dive in with like the thoughts I had going into it. And I just had kind of a busy day running a bunch of errands today after getting back in town. But yeah, I cannot wait to dive back into Tunic, even though I've still got Kirby, which we'll get to in a few weeks or months or whatever. But there's so many games I need to play. But Tunic really, like, I've put 5-6 hours in, and I intend to kind of beat this game. I really want to see it through. I'm really like enjoying the progression. Every time I feel stuck, I'm like inching enough through and like not stuck enough to where and I've had a pretty good track record so far this year of actually seeing games through to the end. Although this is a meteor one for sure, but really challenging. Like, don't go in. It's got a cutesy look, so just know that it's definitely, the combat is hard. My only gripe is maybe some of the first like big boss I fought was like a little bit tough, but there's some accessibility settings where you turn on like no damage mode or whatever if you want to just cheese your way through a boss or something. But why don't we dig into Death's Door next? I'll let you take this one, John. Although, again, I said I've played a little here, so I'm sure I'll chime in a little here and there.
That's actually the point that you ended on for Tunic is kind of like the best like way to really like slide right into Death's Door. Perfect. Is like the combat is really what hooked me in the game. And like, cause I was kind of, I think it was actually in the Legends Arceus stream that we did, that like I think Glenn was hanging out in the chat and like maybe brought up like the idea of Death's Door as a Souls light, and like I kind of, that's the frame of mind at least that I entered into it. Like I purposefully didn't go into it with a lot of knowledge, knowing like what it was, and I was basically going on our friend Mikey was giving us the hardest sell for this game. He's like, this is the best game I've ever played. Like, play this game, buy it now.
And he usually doesn't like lean into like the indie stuff. Like, he's always like kind of playing more AAA. I mean, he plays all sorts of games, but like you don't usually see him like championing a game like this. So I was like, oh, you got my attention.
When he does, he means it. Like, he like is really like pushing for something. And like I trust him like in his judgment. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to look up anything about this game, because at the point I hadn't even heard about it, despite it being like a Devolver Digital game. Like, I don't know if this was like pushed really hard or like advertised like pretty heavily or not.
I think it won like Indie Game of the Year and stuff like that on like some of those award shows. I could be wrong, but not that any of that matters.
Simultaneously plugged in and like completely unaware of like everything.
I could also be totally wrong about that, but it's definitely one that was relatively well known. I like when it came to Game Pass, I was like, yes.
Yeah, but like I hadn't heard anything about this game, and I didn't know anything about it other than like I knew it was kind of like an isometric, Zelda-ish game, which is I kind of reductive in like what it is, but like I went in like thinking that it was, a little bit more like had a little bit more Souls DNA in it. So like for the first, I don't know, like world or so, like I was so afraid of dying because I was afraid of that Souls mechanic of like, oh God, I really just don't want to go back and like gather all my like souls. It's in this game.
Tunic does have that as well. I don't know if Death's Door does. I can't remember.
It doesn't. That was the thing. Like when I died, like, and I just had everything, and I was like, oh, all right, we're off to the races then.
Yeah,
I feel a lot more comfortable, like, trying stuff that might be like punching above my weight a little bit, and like. The game does a really good job, I think, on so many levels of like level design. Like that is what I think is the heaviest like Souls influence, like making shortcuts. Like you will go through an entire area, drop down a gate or drop down a ladder, and like then you can skip that and move a little bit further so you don't have to like do the gauntlet of like going through this area with like a perfect health. Like you can skip that and move forward, which is a staple of the Dark Souls formula.
Yeah, and I feel like the couple times that I got to those points in the game, like I felt like it immediately clicked in my brain. Like as soon as I kicked down the shortcut thing or whatever, it was like, oh, that's that shortcut. Like I knew exactly where it led to.
Yep.
It wasn't like I got to go explore and see, oh, where does this go? It was just like I knew, oh, that's how I get back to where I came from or whatever.
And it's such a satisfying loop in a specific, like in a way that it also is in Dark Souls, but like with so much less pain. And like so much less like feeling just completely devastated and like being able to like just pile up souls. Like the thing that actually like was frustrating for me with the game was that like with Dark Souls you do still have like, even if you are stuck on an area, you have like hundreds of like minute like upgrades that you can do over time. So it's like, okay, like I've been running my head up against this section, but I have 800 levels that I can have my character level up over
that you
time.
can grind out in that section. You can do some grinding.
Yep.
And like Death's Door has that to an extent, but like it has a maximum of I think there's like 5 stats that you have, and like there are 5 levels each for each stat, and like what they increase your like speed of attack or like your dodge like ability or like how much base damage you do or how much your magic does.
Yeah, I think there were 4 or 5, at least how much I played. I think there were about 4 different ones. Yeah,
and like so at a certain point, like there's not a ton of grinding that you can do. Like you so in that respect, like it's a little bit scaled back in terms of that, but like at the same time the level design and the way that they introduce new bosses and like new enemies, like I got to the end of the game and I still had 2 stats that I hadn't maxed out yet because I wasn't dying enough basically for like all the enemies to respawn. So like it was really good. It was a really zeroed in on how many times they expect you kind of to replay a section or find all the secret like soul caches where you can use those to upgrade. And like I'm in what is technically post game now, and there's not really a ton of opportunities like to like get new souls outside of just grinding for it, and I don't really feel the need to. So like again, like I think that the Death's Door has just like immaculate level design and
nice.
And when you say level design, I know you kind of brought attention to like the shortcut aspect, but like the dungeons, at least when I played, are really, really well done. Like there were a couple points where I kind of felt like I got a little bit lost and wrapped around myself or whatever. But as far as like, I played a couple puzzles that were a lot of like shooting arrows through torches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like really, really cool. Like it just felt very satisfying. Even just the way you like charge up your bow to take shots and the way you have to like do melee damage to charge up your bow ammo or whatever like that. I just really like the juxtaposition between the combat and the level design. Like it got a really good pace to the game.
And so there's I will get into spoilers, I think, at this point, because like
Cool.
I don't know how much, like, Randall, I know before the podcast he said you were okay with spoilers, like Kevin, I don't know.
I'm totally cool with it, especially because I'm sucked into Tunic right now. It's as much as I really like both of these games, I would recommend either one to anyone, but I just got more pulled into the world of Tunic. But if Tunic didn't exist, I would easily just have been like, I'm diving into this and trying to beat Death's Door with John or whatever. I really enjoyed the combat, the look of it, everything about it.
I think that if the cell you've gotten for Death's Door at this point has been enough that makes you curious, I'd say just skip this section entirely, skip ahead to the Elden Ring section.
Yeah, we'll have timestamps, yeah.
Yeah, because like I really think that is a strength of the game, and I'm going to get into spoilers starting now. So like once I beat the final boss, like even when I like had gotten to the point where I was at the final boss of the game, I was like, this is a good game. Like, I'm enjoying myself. I think this is a really well constructed game, and I think like it's like pretty like good. I would definitely recommend this game to like people, but I wouldn't say it's like a full-throated endorsement.
And especially like coming in with the way Mikey was like hyping it up, it was definitely like, oh, this is like is it on that tier or is it not?
Exactly. I was like, yeah, this was a solid game. And then I beat the game, and as I was like, you know, watching the final cutscenes or whatever, I was like thinking back to like all the levels that I've been in, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, there were a few things that like I remember, like distinctly remember, like I was like, oh yeah, I never went there. And like the end like cutscene like shows like, oh, that there's like a key that was left behind by the final boss. And I was like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going. And when you see credits, when you see the final boss, that's halfway through the game. Like,
Super Mario 3D Land.
Yeah. No doubt.
Like,
let's go.
Straight up. And then from that point on, well, okay, so I've only done 2 of the 7 remaining things. Like, there's there's so like the secrets in it. Like, this level design is so good in this game. Like there's like the way that they employ secrets, the way that they employ like hints on things are really good. Like, it's mostly all in game, and it like does a really good job of guiding you or like at least telegraphing certain things. Like, I remember like I was going to text Mikey before I beat the last boss. I was like, hey, in this one level, like if you go to like the very far edge of the map, you can see this one item that's like hidden, or like it's like it's flooded and you can only see the top of it. Is like, that's a real cool thing of world building, not knowing that it was telegraphing that it was going to be a section in the post game.
Yes.
That's
like,
so cool.
And like the second half of the game is like, at least for the sections that I've done, have basically removed all combat, and it's just puzzles.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
and like,
interesting, because that was probably the one thing, probably why I got a little, just because it hit me with the combat a little bit earlier than it did in Tunic, as far as the super difficult combat.
And the combat,
so I started dying
hard.
a bunch. It's hard, yeah, and especially with both games. But kind of my main struggle, and I don't know if we'll get into this in Elden Ring at all either, but like with these massive bosses, and then your relatively tiny character, it's just kind of hard to tell like what is doing damage to me and what's not, and where's the attack hitbox and where's my hit. It's just kind of hard to tell sometimes for me,
and
at least.
That's exactly
especially
the
with
same.
that isometric camera.
Yeah, exactly the same with Death's Door, in that like it is so much a Dark Souls mechanic in terms of like the bosses, where you pretty much have to do a no-hit run in order to beat them, because
you don't have a lot of health.
Yep.
So
which is kind of interesting, because the game that the Death's Door developers made before this is a game called Titan Souls, which I have played a little bit of. I think it was a PS Plus game, or I might have even just bought it on sale a long time ago. But
it's 90% off right now. I actually texted Mikey in the middle of this because I was looking up the developer.
Have you played it at all?
No, but I'm buying it and like as soon as we're done, because it's $1.99.
Well, it's basically like a really it's a top-down game, like pixel art style, but it's very heavily inspired by Shadow of the Colossus, and it's like every boss, it's just all boss battles. Every boss takes 1 hit to kill, but you take 1 hit to kill, and you have a bow and arrow that. you have a bow and arrow that you can shoot, and then you just have one arrow, and you have to keep collecting your arrow to fire it again.
Ooh.
And it's all about just hitting that one sweet spot or you dying. But my gripes of it were like, as cool of a game as it was, like when you died, aesthetically it was cool because you spawn back at this spawn point, and then you have to run back to the dungeon. But like after you get to like some of the later dungeons, you're like, man, this is just tedious. It's like it just got tiresome to play. So like as soon as I was like, oh, Death's Door has definitely got that same feeling on the combat, but it's like got a full game packed around it, and it just doesn't have that layer of frustration. I was really excited to dive into that when Mikey had mentioned it was from the same developer.
But yeah, like basically I still have to go back and like finish because there's so much more of like I'm like 2/7 of the way through the post game.
I love that.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And
because you were already hyped on it. Like I thought you had finished. I thought because you were saying you were going to 100% it. So I kind of thought you were going to come to this episode saying that you had polished it off, but
not
it sounds
even
like
close.
You had a lot to do. Yeah.
Like God, the way that like in the post game, the way that it telegraphs if you have like a secret, because like the way that you have shortcuts in the game there are doors, and the doors glow red if there's still something that you need to find in an area. And like, it's just such a good, like all of the in-game mechanics that like guide you towards like finding puzzles and discovering stuff is so satisfying. And like honestly, like as soon as I got to the post game, like it went from a game that I was like, yeah, this is a solid game to this is my favorite game of this year. Like hands down, like not even a competition.
Save it for the holiday episode.
I know. But yeah, I'm very excited to continue playing and exploring and doing like just fucking around and doing nothing, which is what I love doing in Dark Souls games. And Randall, please tell me about what you're doing in Elden Ring.
Yeah, we could have also talked about our favorite games of the year as a good crossover from one to another.
Here we go.
Elden Ring. And this is coming from someone, again, this is going to be pretty spoiler free. This is coming from someone that my Souls experience is only playing about probably like 40% of Dark Souls remastered on Switch.
That's a sizable amount there.
It is.
I thought you were going to say 40 minutes. So that's more than I thought you were going to say.
It was over.
Even 40
it was definitely
hours.
over like 20 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of that was just beating my head against the wall because I had not experienced any of those games before, and that's what you do when you experience one of those.
Yeah, and I know you talked about that game previously on the podcast, but was your like initiative to dive into Dark Souls, was it out of like the curiosity because of the hype, or were you actually compelled like, oh, this is my kind of game and I just haven't gotten around to it yet?
Hype had a lot to play into getting into Dark Souls, and I waited until remastered, so it wasn't like the hype got to me very quickly.
Same.
But I mean, I remember talking to like a buddy I worked with way back in the day about when Demon Souls came out, and he was excited about that and bought the strategy guide and brought it into work. I'd been aware of the series for a really long time, but from what I had heard, I'm like, I don't know. Is this really for me? It seems like you just kind of beat your head against the wall, and it's this like super hardcore, really difficult experience. And like, I'm someone that plays retro games, so I have some familiarity with like really difficult experiences that way. But this is kind of a different level, and it seemed like it was the type of game that you had to like spend all of your time on study, like as if it were a fighting game. I need to understand the mechanics of this game. And it turns out that's kind of true. But when you do so, it is very rewarding. And I'm not the first person to say that by any stretch.
Yeah.
So, but still, I never went back to Dark Souls. I just saw Elden Ring was coming out. I already had the Xbox Series X and a 4K TV, and this was like a huge title coming out. And then early on in the life cycle, I'm like, all right, I got the credit. Let's just throw it at this. Let's give it a shot. Why not? And especially knowing that this was an open world, one of those, that really piqued my interest more than the other ones. So I did that. I bought it, I jumped in, and 50 hours later, I've barely seen most of the map of this game.
Yes.
It's wild. Just seeing clips on Twitter, I'm like, this is the same game?
Yeah, I know.
The fact that you have a map is also such a departure.
Yeah, I know. God. Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Because I forgot that the Souls games don't have that.
No, and what's really stuck in my head ever since John said it was his quote around why Elden Ring, in my eyes, is a superior experience, at least from my perspective, and how I like to play games. And that Dark Souls forces you down this path. And then if you're screwed on that path and you can't beat it, like, oh, then you got real problems.
You just got to keep going down until you do. Like,
run your head against the wall the number of times necessary for you to beat it.
And then you burst through the wall.
Or you stop playing.
Yeah.
Or you go backwards until you've grinded enough and find one other trinket and just happen to be in the right day where you've gotten enough sleep and are in a good enough zone to like do so.
Yeah.
Whereas Elden Ring is an open world game. So there are many, 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 many paths. And because it's an open world game, it's giving me Breath of the Wild vibes in that there's a whole adventure and exploration element to this. It's not just a combat thing at this point. And to be fair, in the Souls games, there's a lot of, collecting and there's, those pieces, but it's on a linear path where this is Breath of the Wildy, where I'm picking up lots of trinkets and berries and things like that, and I can craft them into other things. And oh my God, I love those sort of mechanics. That's what got me playing Breath of the Wild for 130 plus hours. I love that stuff, right?
Yeah, giving you that freedom and then rewarding you for like taking advantage of the freedom is just a great feeling.
It's amazing. And especially in like a game that, can lean more into like the systems. There's interacting systems. And this is another game that has a lot of interacting systems. I won't get into the details of those, but it has them. And, that's just like there's layers of different approaches to scenarios a la Breath of the Wild, like all that stuff. It's just, I'm very much into it in a way that I was not into my other Dark Souls experience. But it still has a lot of the same obtuseness that I experienced before in Dark Souls, right? It's like, I can't figure out how to
laughing
compare.
NPCs have you met?
Who's an NPC, who's an enemy?
Right.
What are they even telling me if it is an NPC? Is this actually worthwhile or not? I can't figure out how to compare equipment against other equipment to see which one's better or not in an easy like an old like 8-bit or 16-bit RPG you wouldn't like
right.
But you figure it out. I guess.
Now what is there anything in particular that Elden Ring, because like at a quick glance it does look very similar to the Dark Souls games or Demon Souls. Yeah. Whereas like I think like if you see Bloodborne or Sekiro in action, I think those two games kind of stand out as like for example, they're like two games that even though I'm not into the Souls games, I'm like, I think maybe I would like those games.
Oh yeah.
But like is there anything that Elden Ring is bringing to the table other than I know there's a horse, but like, is it doing anything different or does it feel mostly like a Souls game?
It does have a horse. And otherwise, it's more, so they brought in George R.R. Martin, the creator of Game of Thrones, to help with storytelling, world building, all that sort of stuff. So it has even more of kind of a fantasy vibe, I guess.
Okay.
That way, that kind of fantasy background, which I think is really cool. And there's lots of like environmental storytelling in this game too, which is also really, really cool. But I mean, it's just, man.
I'm just always sort of curious why it's not like Dark Souls 4. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just always like, why is this one separate and like its own thing? But yeah.
To my understanding, it's like it's not really carrying, or at least from what I've seen so far, and spoilers or not, I don't have a lot of knowledge base of the other Souls games. I don't think.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's carrying through any of the story aspects of what I had played from Dark Souls Remastered. It's its own thing,
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's like, a very like Miyazaki kind of does his standard story throughout all of them. Like there is very like he hits the same beats on most of them, but like it doesn't. It seems like it's its own world, its own universe, and it's not doing. And it like even if it's hitting, you're the tarnished instead of the undead, or instead.
Well, that I like that because like for example, like when they made like God of War 3 on what was it, PlayStation 3, it's like I'm way less likely to dive into that than I am to dive into the new God of War on PS4 because it's like, oh, this is a reboot of the series. Like as soon as I see a number in the title, I'm like, oh, I must need to play the previous ones just for whatever reason, the way my brain works. So the fact that this is just Elden Ring standalone title, it means like, okay, this is safe to dive into even if you've never played any of the Dark Souls games.
Oh, and I think it is. In at least from my experience, I hope it's coming through that this is an easier thing to jump into despite the obtuseness than Dark Souls was. But awesome. Then to be fair, I was already informed by my 20 plus hours of Dark Souls experience as to how, the combat and equipment and menus kind of go. I was going to
ask, right? Like how much or like what build have you like approached Elden Ring in terms of like your character and or weapon loadout, and like has that like translated pretty well from Dark Souls?
Yeah. So I'll say, in Dark Souls, I tried to go relatively traditional where I was, shield and sword and, just like bulk up those sort of things, traditional fighter kind of straight down the line sort of thing. Whereas in Elden Ring, you have a lot of different options.
Yeah.
You can lean more magical versus you could go sword and shield. You could go no shield a la Bloodborne if you wanted to and just roll around a whole lot. You could do all those sorts of things. I lean more magic so far. And I've been enjoying that too. And not to like, it's not a spoiler thing, but like the magic, I guess, allows me as someone that doesn't have a lot of time and is often, has some level of tiredness when I start playing these games at the end of the day to still engage in the combat without hitting my head against the wall, right? Because you can use your magic spells from farther away from these massive things that'll smash your face in a couple of hits, right?
Focus a little more on dodging and just like staying out of the way and shoot some spells.
Yes.
Yeah. Because like the thing that I'm, not hesitant for, like I'm not going to get this game until it's available on a platform I can actually play. So like, it's going to be 10 years basically until I can play this game.
Elden Ring remastered.
Right. But a thing that I've actually maybe like leaned a little too heavily on throughout the Dark Souls series is that I've played the same build every single game. I've played they have an axe that controls basically identical throughout like 1 through 3.
Sure.
And I've always been pyromancer, and like starting in 2 when they give you 3 equipment slots instead of 3, then I always have a bow equipped.
Nice.
So like I'm just always a heavy dex int like faith build, and it's been great because it controls the same in every game, and like it's the consistency has been so nice. So like part of me is like, oh god, will I have to learn a second way to play this series?
No. Based on you saying that, absolutely not. No,
good,
because I put a lot into intelligence. I've started to up faith. And intelligence and whatever the other magic thing is that lets your bar go up. Yeah. So just like, I've put a lot into those and enough dexterity and strength to carry a weapon that I can beat somebody with, with a good smash, like a hammer type of thing. And that's fun for me. So
have a good enough equipment load so that you're not doing a fat roll.
Yes. Which is always, there's a push and pull there a la the other games as well.
Yeah.
That you keep running into when you get new cool shit. Oh no, it makes me heavier. I had to figure out either I'm going to cut weight somehow or I need to grind until I can level up again and put it back into stamina points or whatever. Yes, all the same type of thing there. But for whatever reason, this game clicks for me like crazy. Like right now, and I've told the dudes I've been playing, a handful of games that I would all potentially consider on my game of the year list, and this keeps taking most of my attention.
Yeah,
that's impressive. Because again, like I feel like none of us are really diving into like the AAA stuff all that often these days. I mean, we all do play the Nintendo stuff. We all play AAA games. It's not like that's out of the ordinary. But I don't know. It's been a while since. Like, especially like a brutally hard game and a new game. Like, that's definitely not like, I feel like we're always talking about on the podcast. I just want to like chill and like click on my buttons on my mouse and just like lay on my recliner while I play games. I'm not always like up to like for this challenge, but like every now and then it just scratches the right itch and you like feel, I don't know, it just like drives you to want to beat down some of these bosses.
Dark Souls can be a chill game when, I'm grinding. And I feel like Elden Ring just replaces the grinding with exploring, because you're still
which is
gaining
way more
experience
fun.
and doing stuff, but it's instead of you doing the same route over and over again, which is in its own satisfying
It is, and it's still, you can still do that, and it's still satisfying to do that. And sometimes it's like, I want to get another level for this or that reason, and I know I can grind this little area a couple of times and do so. And it's still satisfying to do that, because, every time you engage in combat, it's satisfying. Like I mentioned, being a little bit tired playing it, if I'm too tired and a couple enemies, even lower level enemies, get on top of me, I'm like, shit. And you're dead in 2 seconds. You've lost all your souls. You have to stay engaged in this. And that's that tension is what drives you in these sort of experiences. And it's real good.
Yeah, and I think I played enough of Death's Door to say this. I think you'd say the same about Tunic and Death's Door. You're on the edge of your seat, at least for me, at all times. I'm I can't die. It's not the most punishing thing if you die, but at the same time, it's I really don't want to die. But I really did enjoy the combat, especially. I know I kind of griped about some of the boss combat with these massive bosses and kind of not being able to judge the hit boxes or whatever, but the enemies, I really like the interplay, and I'm sure the Souls games do this as well, but I love how the enemies can kind of attack one another. There's almost a little bit of that roguelike, the environments and there's I just really love that. The big enemy will do a big spin attack, and it's oh shit, but it's he just cleared out all the minions in the same time, so I'm not so mad.
Area of attack bomb in Death's Door is the best thing, because you can dodge so much better than the other enemies can. So
nice.
it's great when a huge enemy takes out all the small enemies for you.
Oh yeah. It's so you almost want to try to kite enemies to the bosses. Go ahead, take them out for me.
That's one of my favorite things in games, period, is oh shit, the enemies can hit each other. That's so cool.
It's so satisfying. Again, it kind of back to what you were saying about just those systems interplaying with one another. It's everything is it feels more alive when that happens.
Yes. It does.
Especially when it happens unexpectedly. It's awesome.
Yes.
But you said you've been playing on the Xbox, Randall? The Xbox
Series X.
Nice. And it's been running, looking good and everything?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's a beautiful experience. I really haven't described much of it because I'm not spoiling anything, but it looks, plays, sounds great. It's an experience. I'm really enjoying it.
Heck yeah, and I'm sure we'll end up hearing more about it down the line. Hope maybe more about all these games, because it sounds like we've all got a little ways to go.
Yes.
I've got more than a little ways to go, but I don't know. Any more thoughts on Elden Ring or any of these three games, or do we feel like we're good to wrap it up? I don't want to cut anybody short here, but
I think I'm good. The only other thing I'll say is you can also tell in a good way that this is a Japanese developed game.
Yes.
Because it's the typical cynical or attitude-y type of vibes that you get in a lot of other games just isn't there. There's a sincerity in what it's presenting to you, and I just I'm so into it. I love that.
Yeah,
Nice.
I've really enjoyed even seeing I've seen a couple even just little not interviews but little pull quotes from George R.R. Martin, and it's even he's really getting into the game and promoting it and stuff and talking about how I'm really glad people are resonating with this character or this they probably thought that was Sakurai or not Sakurai, Miyazaki.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm back to Smash Brothers, but I thought that was Miyazaki, or you probably thought that was Miyazaki, but that was actually me.
Yeah.
Which I guess tooting his own horn, but whatever. Just kind of cool. Just kind of cool. Who would think Miyazaki and George R. R. Martin make a game together? That's crazy.
It is wild.
It's kind of cool that games get, Death Stranding, Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. It's kind of cool how games are bringing people together.
It is cool.
Still need to play Death Stranding too.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think we can probably wrap up the video games talk there this week. And again, we might get back into all these three games at some point. I know I'll definitely be streaming some more Tunic. And I know we mentioned Kirby briefly. I know we'll be talking about that on the podcast in coming weeks.
Definitely.
I'm definitely going to be streaming that, maybe even from the jump. I haven't played any of it yet. So maybe I'll do a little first play of that. I cannot wait to dive into that game. But anyways, you can find us on the internet, pursuingpixels.com. We're pretty much everywhere on the internet. Just look up Pursuing Pixels. And otherwise we will catch you next week. And until then, take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I gotta buy Titan Souls because it's $1.99 right now.
On Switch?
Steam.
Okay, I was gonna say I didn't know that game was on Switch. I don't think it is.
Is that
I think
game
I
on
picked it up.
Switch?
Nah, PS4
I don't think so,
and
yeah.
Vita.
Oh,
Ooh, Vita, dude. The most, speaking of Twitter earlier, the most annoying people on Twitter are the people that go PS Vita ? To every fucking game that ever comes out. There's
they
there's
literally
a couple.
can't even manufacture the cartridges anymore, folks.
I
Yeah.
know, and everyone's like, "Is it?" It's like, dude, I know you want it on that system, but like,
Business case.
Also,
Business case.
just fucking look it up. Don't ask the developer
Yes.
to comment on Twitter. Just fucking look it up.
Take
But-
2 seconds to Google.
Is it coming out? Is it coming to Mac?
But
I don't know.
I also
Mapport?
get the thought of like, oh, but I'm showing the developer that I
Yeah.
have a desire on this system that they maybe
I'll
won't
encourage
put it
them
on.
to.
Unless,
Yeah.
yeah. So, like, that's...
But people, like
But
the
you're
other
just
day,
showing
like,
the one comms intern that you
yeah,
wanted on.
yes, exactly.
and back to
Vita.
back to the Twitter discourse. Like 2D and Top D just got announced for Switch.
Yeah.
That's
And
sweet.
on the Switch announcement, like somebody's like, "Why didn't you just figure out how to make it work on the Steam Deck? Why didn't you just make it work on the Steam Deck?" And he was just like, the developer was just like, "To the best of my knowledge, it already does." Like, I don't know.
Because we have to partner with Valve, and they've got this long list of priority games before they get to something like 2D and Top D.
Yeah. They were just like, there's a huge player base for these types of games on Switch. Like, why don't you just say, "Hey, cool," or just say
Yeah.
nothing? Steam Deck. I hope the
I
Steam
love
Deck
the voice
fucking.
you're doing.
I know. It's like, we need the Steam Deck. Come on, guys. I hate the Steam Deck so much.
Why do you
I
hate
hope-
the Steam Deck so much?
I just,
Kevin?
it's only because like the people around it that are just going like,
Yeah, this is
Going berserk.
I am not aware of this type of person, so I think this is a self-selection.
I also hate Valve. So, but,
Yes,
but on,
okay,
on
that
Twitter,
is a fair yes.
on
No.
Twitter, I keep seeing, and I shouldn't say I hate Valve, but I just hate like Steam has pretty much like destroyed the indie game market. And it would have happened probably anyways,
Yeah.
but like the value of an indie game is like nothing these days, and like.
Yeah.
They just take
Yeah.
a huge cut. They don't. They just kind of seem like they sort of suck, and they just buy up small developers when they make cool games, and then like never let them make anything cool again. They just suck.
Are you talking about Half-Life Alyx came out?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, oh yeah, in the Valley of the Gods, you can't make it anymore. Go make a Half-Life tech demo for us. You know, it just sucks, man. Like, I'm sure it's awesome for the people that work there, and they don't of the huge like conglomerate corporations or whatever. They're corporations. They don't seem that bad in the grand scheme of things.
For how
like,
they
compared
treat
to
their people, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say compared to like Activision, Blizzard, and stuff like that. Like,
Yes.
in the grand scheme of things, like it could be worse.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, but they're not good.
yeah.
They're by any stretch of the definition.